The recruiting dead period. What is a dead period? Well, it just means essentially nothing can really be happening. There are no visits, coaches going to your school, you coming to that school. There's nothing happening really. Everything's been shut down now, obviously, for about a year. I mean, we're coming up on close to a year since everything's been shut down. There are no camps. There are no visits. If I'm a prospective athlete, I'm not going to Georgia, and Georgia can't come look at me. All that stuff's been in place. We all understand why it's been in place. Right now, and here's the latest, and here's why I wanted to talk about this tonight. The D1, sort of the Football Oversight Committee. It's a lot more complex than just saying the NCAA, which I did last night, and I'll get to that in a second. But the Football Oversight Committee, essentially it's a lot of presidents, overseers basically, people who the NCAA works for. They have recommended, and I expect the NCAA shortly to follow through on this, extending the dead period through the end of May, through May 31st. That's a little ways away. So we got all of March, all of April, all of May. And so I expect that to pass. Last night I tweeted out a sentiment, a very general sentiment, and I said, I think it's been embarrassing how the NCAA has handled this entire dead period, and they just kind of, it's like kicking a can down the road. There's very little pragmatism behind it. Well, I did something that I kind of get tired of other people doing. So let me backtrack a little bit on that. When I say NCAA, it's kind of this all-encompassing, everyone throws their rocks at the NCAA. Well, in this case, some of you spoke up and you were right. My sentiment still stands, but you were right in saying maybe take that laser and maybe direct it at where it needs to be directed at, and that's university presidents, because largely it's what they're saying that's just getting rubber stamped by the NCAA. Point taken, point ceded. Now, let's direct our ire, or my ire at least, to where it belongs. You can decide what you think about this, but I want to frame all this against the backdrop that was provided to us from Nick Saban when we had him on this show 2 weeks ago, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, National Signing Day, and we were talking to him about recruiting, about National Signing Day, and about the 2021 class, how hard had it been? And he kind of threw us a little bit of curveball, and he didn't say it had been easy, but he said the 2021 class was okay because we already had evaluations on a lot of guys. It's the 2022 class. So in other words, the guys who are going to be seniors this upcoming fall, it's that one that we may be a little bit behind on. That's the head coach at Alabama talking. So Ryan Day, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, those guys feel that way. Now I want you to think about what it's like if you're not a top 247 style 4 or 5 star player. I want you to think about what it's like if you're going to be a guy who's borderline to get that FBS offer or an FCS offer, and there aren't dozens or hundreds of those guys out there. There are thousands of those guys out there in any given cycle. So my stance is this. And again, you can tell me how you feel in the comments. A lot of you have been very vocal about this. I think it's just laughable to suggest that at this stage now, we aren't entering this. We've kind of got the lay of the land. We just had an entire college football season. A lot of you had entire high school football seasons. A lot of you are attending camps right now. I think it's laughable, myself, to suggest that you couldn't safely have recruits able to visit college campuses, and you couldn't safely get college coaches out on the road, again, safely, going through all the proper precautions to visit high schools. I think that's laughable, okay? That's my personal stance. Whichever entity's standing in the way of it, NCAA Oversight Committee, FBS Oversight Committee, presidents, whatever the case, I think it's laughable, okay? So, again, you're going to have the 4 and 5 star crowd. They're going to get their offers regardless. Their film will get out. There will be adequate evaluations on those kids where their offer list will probably look the same. I'm not talking about the dozens to hundreds. I'm talking about the hundreds to thousands that don't fit that description, okay? And instead of talking about Wisconsin, let's talk about maybe a guy who could go to Wisconsin Whitewater. Let's just separate it like that. Or instead of a guy going to Michigan, maybe a guy who is more an Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan caliber player. 2 years now. If you're a rising senior, if you're class of 2022, you are starting to enter a stretch where you've gone now 2 years of missed camp opportunities, 2 years of missed in-person evaluation where that coaching staff can get their eyeballs on you, and you've got 2 years now potentially of visits that have been missed. And by the way, just because we're talking about May 31st being that line of demarcation, and it is assumed, and I do assume this too, it is assumed that in June and July we'll start to get visits again. I assume that. That's not a certainty yet. And even if it is a certainty, it's no guarantee that every kid's just going to magically be able to get out on the road and afford to go take unofficials or officials, because then you've got a lot of stuff coming up with your own high school football season. Your official visit window is going to be very truncated. Also, you've got to take into account whether programs that you previously would have had an opportunity to get in front of, there just isn't time to get in front of all of them. All of this stuff is in play. And so here's what I get back. Because all I'm asking for is pragmatism. That's all I'm asking someone, give me pragmatic reasons why we cannot get creative. And I don't even think you have to be too creative to safely allow this stuff to happen at this point. And so I start to get some feedback on this. And a lot of the feedback I get is just like hyperbolic. There's not really any meat on the bone. So some of the feedback that I've gotten on this is, well, those are the rules. And I get that. Like, I understand why they're the rules. If I drive past a 45 mile per hour sign on the interstate, it's not that I can't read the sign. I'm asking, why is it 45 on the interstate? I don't see any construction around here. There is not a wreck. There's not a major spill of toxic chemicals up ahead. So why is it 45? Can we get together and can we maybe bump this to 55, maybe 60, 65? Like, that would be more realistic for our surroundings right now. Then I get told, well, the world's not going to stop spinning off its axis just because kids can't take visits. Yeah, you're right. I got news for you. The world's not going to stop spinning if college football disappears entirely. Again, it's hyperbolic. Like, there's no substance to that. The world wouldn't stop spinning if I took away your paycheck for the next month. The world would go right on about itself. No one would really care. You would, though, because now it affects you personally, and there was no reason for your paycheck to be taken away. It just got taken away. Hey, someone passed a rule, no paycheck for you, so your paycheck gets taken away. Well, the world's still spinning. All of a sudden, though, we're really upset, aren't we? So there is no pragmatic, practical, logic-based reasoning, to me, that's been given so far why this stuff can't happen. And by the way, I guarantee you some of these folks will be the same ones quiet come signing day when the transfer portal is being hit up to an even higher degree, percentage-wise, than it is right now. And you got even more high school kids who were borderline or may have just been able to get in as the number 22 or 23 player in like a G5 caliber class. Those kids, where are they going now? Like, and football could have been their only shot, by the way. Football may have been their plan A, and in the blank of plan B, there is no plan B. And you can criticize them all you want to for that. There are thousands of kids who meet that qualification and criteria every year. They end up getting scholarships, and they change their lives forever. So, again, world's still going to be on its axis. I want you to look those kids in the eye and tell them that. So we can operate under this assumption that everything will be fine. We'll get visits in June or July. And even though we've disrupted 1.5 to 2 years of this cycle, it'll all work out for the 2020 class, which is garbage, which is a pile of you-know-what. But I'm not one of those kids, okay? So it's still not going to impact me. I just look at this entity and these bodies that claim to be all about what's best for the student athlete, and yet no one's really asking them. No one's hitting them up when we're dealing with matters that directly pertain to what's in the best interest of the student athlete. Now, here's why I don't think you've heard more voices on this. This is a reality too. I had, I think it was Bud Elliott, who came in last night and said, it's not the NCAA, it's university presidents really that are to blame here, because a lot of them, and this is a cold, hard reality, a lot of them don't really mind all that much, this current situation. See, not everyone out there is Florida, or not everyone's LSU or Texas A&M. A lot of them out there understand they're saving a lot of money. And right now the status quo is no one can do anything, and that's great because, that means the big spenders who would be able to run circles around us in terms of budgetary resources that we don't have, well, they can't do it right now. So a lot of them, very quietly, sitting over in the corner with a sweater vest on, and wine glass held underhanded, they love what's happening right now. And so that is the rubber stamp that the NCAA is being handed to move this thing to May 31st. The other thing that's in play, and you'll never get them to admit this publicly, is there's some coaches who are just fine with this too. Because you know what a lot of coaches would really prefer to be able to do in February, March, and then after spring ball? You know what they'd really love to be able to do? Vacation. They'd really love to get the same amount of vacation that you and I get, get paid 9,000% of what we get paid, but they really love to vacation more. Now, right now, we're showing you Dabo Swinney, we're showing you Nick Saban, B-roll of those guys. They probably wouldn't, but they're also on top of the sport. There are some other programs that, they'd like to take a little time off, and the only reason that they can't do it right now is because they know they'll get outworked, and there are enough coaches in the room that will work 366 days a year if you let them. So you got some presidents who like it, some presidents who hate it. You got some coaches who like it, some coaches who hate it. But That's not who I'm doing the segment for. Haven't mentioned them until the very end. I'm talking about the high school players, specifically class of 2022. If you're looking out for their best interest, then what a president thinks doesn't really matter to me, what a coach thinks doesn't really matter to me, because you can allow things, you can remove some of those barriers, and then everyone can just make their own choice. If you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. If you want to go for it, then go for it, but allow them to make their choice. Right now, they don't have the choice. So that's my beef.